rubric for the activity over the cichlids, which are those little fish. So the first part is asking you to make a claim that answers the scientific question. The scientific question is, how does the presence of neighboring groups affect conflict between breeding pairs? So based on the graph and the data that we're provided, we can make the claim that there is a statistically significant difference between breeding pairs with neighboring groups and breeding pairs that are isolated for physical attacks and aggressive behaviors. That means there are less aggressive behaviors and attacks when neighboring groups are present. AKA, there is less conflict between the breeding pairs when neighboring groups are present. The second part asks you what evidence was used to write your claim. You need to reference specific parts of the table or graphs. This is where those sim bars that you drew come in handy. Okay, just like we've taught you from the beginning of the year, you make your claim about the data, you point out the data, and why it's statistically significant or not. That's always your sim bars. So we would say that the sim bars do not overlap when comparing the average number of attacks between isolated pairs and pairs with neighbors. On the other hand, we can also say the sim bars do not overlap when comparing the number of aggressive behaviors between those with and without neighbors. The important part here that I want to point out to you guys is that those sim bars do not overlap. Okay, that's what shows that we have a statistically significant difference. Now, the third part is where we start to get a little beefier. It asks you to explain your reasoning and why the evidence supports your claim. This is where you're going to connect the data back to what you learned about potential threats of neighboring groups and how their presence could impact conflict within the group. Based on the reading that was provided, we can connect the data with that information. So those behaviors associated with aggression decreased when the neighbors were present. That decrease indicates that the conflict between the pair went down when they were around neighbors. This suggests that the pair is working together more in order to defend their territory. The last part is, did the data support the scientist's hypothesis? Use evidence to explain why or why not, and if you feel the data was inconclusive, explain why. So looking at the data and comparing it to the hypothesis, I can see that the data supports the hypothesis because there was a statistically significant decrease in aggression when the neighbors were present. However, the data was kind of inconclusive because there was no statistically significant change in affiliative behavior in the presence of neighbors. So yes, there was less conflict, but based on the data, that might not necessarily imply that they were working together better in any way. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher. Bye!